Hello, I'm SA, your AI essayist. Please note that all content, audio and video in this presentation are AI generated. As AI can sometimes produce inaccuracies, I encourage you to verify any factual information presented. With that in mind, let's begin.
Aaron Beck's name stands as a cornerstone in the evolution of psychotherapy. His journey began within the established framework of psychoanalysis, a field he initially embraced. Yet his rigorous scientific curiosity led him to question some of its fundamental tenets regarding the nature and treatment of depression. This questioning, born from empirical observation, ultimately resulted in the development of cognitive therapy, a revolutionary approach that reshaped the landscape of mental health care. Beck's early professional life involved a deep immersion in psychoanalytic theory and practice. He diligently applied its principles, seeking to alleviate the suffering of his patients. However, he noticed a discrepancy between the theoretical explanations offered by psychoanalysis and the actual experiences reported by individuals struggling with depression. Psychoanalytic theory posited that depression stemmed from unconscious anger turned inward, a concept that Beck sought to validate through systematic research driven by commitment to evidence-based practice that designed experiments intended to confirm the psychoanalytic hypothesis. These studies, however, yielded unexpected results. Instead of finding evidence of repressed hostility, Beck discovered that his depressed patients were consistently plagued by negative thoughts and distorted perceptions of themselves, their world, and their future. These thoughts appeared automatic, almost reflexive, and significantly influenced their emotional state and behavior. One particularly striking example involved a patient grappling with persistent feelings of inadequacy. Psychoanalytic interpretations might have attributed this feeling to unresolved childhood conflicts or repressed aggression. Beck, however, observed that the patient frequently engaged in what he termed catastrophizing. This cognitive distortion involved exaggerating the potential negative consequences of events, even minor ones. For example, a simple mistake at work would trigger a cascade of thought such as, I'm going to get fired, I'll never find another job, and I'll end up homeless. This pattern of catastrophic thinking, readily observable in the patient's conscious thought processes, seemed far more directly related to their depressive symptoms than any hypothetical unconscious conflict. Further investigation revealed that this patient, along with others experiencing depression, shared similar patterns of distorted thinking. Beck identified a range of these cognitive distortions, including overgeneralization, drawing broad negative conclusions from single events, selective abstraction focusing on negative details while ignoring positive aspects, and personalization attributing external events to oneself without sufficient evidence. He recognized that these distortions were not random occurrences, but rather systematic biases in the way individuals with depression processed information. These groundbreaking observations formed the bedrock of cognitive therapy. Beck proposed that depression is fundamentally a disorder of thinking, characterized by negative and unrealistic beliefs about oneself, the world, and the future. He argued that these beliefs, often operating outside of conscious awareness, shape an individual's emotional experience and behavior. Cognitive therapy, therefore, aims to directly address these cognitive distortions. It operates on several core principles. The first involves assisting patients in identifying negative automatic thoughts, those fleeting, often unnoticed thoughts that pop into their minds in response to various situations. These thoughts, while seemingly insignificant, can have a profound impact on mood and behavior. The second principle emphasizes the connection between thoughts, feelings, and behavior. Cognitive therapy helps patients understand how their thoughts directly influence their emotions and actions. By recognizing this connection, individuals can begin to take control of their emotional responses. The third and perhaps most crucial principle involves challenging cognitive distortions. Cognitive therapists work collaboratively with patients to examine the evidence supporting and refuting their negative thoughts. Through a process of guided discovery, patients learn to identify logical errors in their thinking and develop more balanced and realistic perspectives. This process frequently involves techniques such as thought records, where patients document their negative thoughts, the situations that trigger them, and the evidence for and against those thoughts. By systematically analyzing their thinking patterns, patients can gradually dismantle cognitive distortions that fuel their depression. Beck's initial findings, which challenged the prevailing psychoanalytic view, sparked a paradigm shift in the understanding and treatment of depression. His work highlighted the crucial role of cognition in mental health and paved the way for the development of a highly effective and empirically supported therapy. Cognitive therapy offered a tangible, practical approach to alleviating suffering, empowering individuals to actively manage their thoughts and emotions. The implications of his work extended far beyond the treatment of depression, influencing the development of cognitive behavioral therapies for a wide range of psychological disorders. The systematic application of these cognitive interventions, as detailed previously, builds upon a foundational understanding of the cognitive processes underpinning depression. Beck proposed a comprehensive cognitive model to explain the development and maintenance of depressive symptoms, a model centered around three core components of the cognitive triad: schemas and cognitive distortions. These elements intertwine to create a self-sustaining cycle of negative thinking and emotional distress. At the heart of the model lies the cognitive triad, encompassing a person's negative views of themselves, their world, and their future. Individuals experiencing depression often harbor a pessimistic outlook across these three domains. They may perceive themselves as fundamentally flawed, incompetent, or unworthy of love and happiness. The world, in their eyes, appears hostile, unfair, and filled with insurmountable obstacles. Finally, they anticipate a bleak future characterized by continued suffering, failure, and hopelessness. Consider, for instance, someone struggling with persistent feelings of inadequacy. They might believe they are inherently incapable of succeeding in their career, a negative view of self. This belief might then extend to their perception of the workplace, which they see as a competitive environment where only the most ruthless individuals thrive, a negative view of the world. Consequently, they might anticipate being perpetually stuck in a dead-end job, facing constant rejection, and ultimately failing to achieve their professional aspirations, a negative view of the future. This interconnected web of negative beliefs reinforces their depressive symptoms, creating a vicious cycle of despair. Underlying the cognitive triad are schemas, which represent deeply ingrained core beliefs about oneself, others, and the world. These schemas develop over time through early experiences and shape how individuals interpret and process information. In essence, they act as mental templates that filter and organize our perceptions. While schemas can be adaptive, providing a framework for understanding and navigating the world, they can also become dysfunctional, leading to biased and distorted thinking. For example, an individual who experienced significant criticism or rejection during childhood might develop a schema related to worthlessness. This schema could manifest as a pervasive belief that they are fundamentally inadequate and undeserving of positive attention or affection in their daily life. This schema might lead them to dismiss compliments, focus on their perceived flaws, and interpret neutral events as evidence of their inadequacy. If a colleague does not respond to their email immediately, they might automatically assume it's because the colleague dislikes them, reinforcing their core belief of being unworthy. These dysfunctional schemas fuel the development of cognitive distortions, which are systematic errors in thinking that perpetuate negative emotions and behaviors. These distortions represent biased interpretations of reality, often exaggerating negative aspects of situations while minimizing or ignoring positive ones. Beck identified several common cognitive distortions that contribute to depression, including arbitrary inference, selective abstraction, overgeneralization, magnification and minimization, personalization, and dichotomous thinking. Arbitrary inference involves drawing conclusions without sufficient evidence or even in the face of contradictory evidence. An example might be assuming a friend is angry with you based solely on their tone of voice, without any other supporting information. Selective abstraction refers to focusing on a single negative detail of a situation while ignoring other, more positive aspects. For instance, dwelling on one critical comment in a performance review while disregarding the numerous positive remarks. Overgeneralization involves drawing broad conclusions based on a single event. Someone might conclude they are a complete failure after making one mistake at work. Magnification and minimization involve exaggerating the significance of negative events while downplaying the importance of positive ones. A person might catastrophize a minor setback, seeing it as a major disaster, while dismissing their accomplishments as insignificant. Personalization involves attributing external events to oneself without justification. For example, believing that a colleague's bad mood is directly caused by something you did, even if there's no evidence to support this assumption. Dichotomous thinking, also known as all-or-nothing thinking, involves viewing situations in extreme terms with no middle ground. Someone might believe they are either a complete success or a total failure, with no possibility of being somewhere in between. These cognitive distortions are often triggered by automatic thoughts, which are spontaneous, involuntary thoughts that arise in response to specific situations. These thoughts occur rapidly and often outside of conscious awareness, yet they exert a powerful influence on our emotions and behaviors. Automatic thoughts are typically negative and self-critical, reflecting underlying dysfunctional schemas and contributing to the cognitive triad. Consider a scenario where an individual with a schema related to worthlessness is asked to lead a presentation at work. This situation might trigger a negative automatic thought such as, "I'm going to mess this up and everyone will think I'm incompetent." This automatic thought, derived from their dysfunctional schema, fuels the cognitive triad. They perceive themselves as incapable of delivering a successful presentation, a negative view of self. They anticipate that their colleagues will judge them harshly and view them as incompetent, a negative view of the world. They foresee that this failed presentation will damage their career prospects and lead to further rejection, a negative view of the future. This interplay between the schema, automatic thought, and cognitive triad intensifies their anxiety and reinforces their depressive symptoms. They might then avoid preparing adequately for the presentation, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. The cognitive model posits that depression is maintained by this cyclical interaction between schemas, cognitive distortions, automatic thoughts, and the cognitive triad. Negative schemas predispose individuals to interpret experiences in a biased and distorted manner, leading to negative automatic thoughts that reinforce a negative view of themselves, their world, and their future. This, in turn, strengthens the underlying schemas, perpetuating the cycle of depression. Breaking this cycle requires identifying and modifying these maladaptive cognitive patterns. The cognitive model of depression continues to inform our understanding of this complex disorder and serves as a cornerstone for modern cognitive therapy approaches. Research continues to support the validity of the cognitive triad as a key component of depression. Studies have consistently demonstrated that individuals experiencing depression exhibit more negative views of themselves, their world, and their future compared to those who are not depressed. Furthermore, interventions targeting the cognitive triad have been shown to be effective in reducing depressive symptoms. This enduring relevance underscores the significance of Beck's cognitive model as a framework for understanding and treating depression. Breaking this cycle requires identifying and modifying these maladaptive cognitive patterns, a process facilitated by specific therapeutic techniques developed by Aaron Beck. These techniques are designed to help individuals recognize, evaluate, and ultimately alter the negative automatic thoughts and cognitive distortions that fuel their depressive symptoms. One of the foundational tools in cognitive therapy is the thought record, a structured method for capturing and analyzing negative automatic thoughts. Patients are encouraged to record situations that trigger negative emotions, the specific thoughts that arise in those situations, the emotions they experience, and the intensity of those emotions. For example, a patient might record feeling anxious before a presentation at work. The associated thought could be, "I am going to fail and everyone will think I am incompetent." The patient would then rate their anxiety level, perhaps an 8 out of 10. The next step involves evaluating the evidence for and against the negative thought. This encourages patients to examine the validity of their assumptions and consider alternative perspectives. In the presentation example, the patient might acknowledge past successful presentations or positive feedback received from colleagues. They might also consider that even if the presentation does not go perfectly, it does not necessarily equate to complete failure or universal condemnation. Finally, the patient formulates a more balanced and realistic thought. This revised thought should take into account the evidence gathered and aim to reduce the intensity of the negative emotion. A revised thought in this scenario could be, I have prepared well for this presentation, and while I may feel nervous, I am capable of delivering it effectively. Even if there are minor issues, it will not be a complete disaster, and my colleagues are generally supportive. The patient will then reassess their anxiety level, which ideally would be lower than their initial rating. Behavioral experiments offer another powerful technique for challenging negative predictions and testing the validity of maladaptive beliefs. These experiments involve designing real-world activities that allow patients to gather evidence and evaluate their expectations. A patient who believes they are incapable of enjoying social situations might be encouraged to attend a social gathering with a specific objective, such as initiating a conversation with one new person. Before the experiment, the patient would predict the outcome, including the likelihood of negative events occurring, such as being rejected or feeling overwhelmed. During and after the experiment, the patient would carefully observe their experiences and gather data. Did they actually experience the predicted negative outcomes? How did others respond to them? What emotions did they actually feel? Following the experiment, the patient and therapist would analyze the results together. This analysis often reveals that the patient's negative predictions were exaggerated or inaccurate. For instance, the patient might discover that they were able to initiate a conversation successfully and that the other person was receptive and friendly. This direct experience can be a powerful way to disconfirm negative beliefs and promote more realistic thinking. Socratic questioning, a cornerstone of cognitive therapy, involves guiding patients to discover insights and challenge their beliefs through a series of carefully crafted questions. The therapist avoids directly telling the patient what to think, instead prompting them to examine their assumptions, consider alternative perspectives, and draw their conclusions. For example, a patient who believes they are worthless might be asked questions such as, what evidence supports your belief that you are worthless? Can you think of any times when you have been successful or helpful to others? What would someone who cares about you say about your worth? Are there different ways of interpreting your experiences? Through this process of guided discovery, patients can begin to identify inconsistencies in their thinking and develop more balanced and realistic views of themselves. Socratic questioning helps patients to become more aware of their cognitive distortions and to develop skills for challenging them independently. It fosters critical thinking and empowers patients to become their own therapists. Collaborative empiricism is a fundamental principle that underscores the therapeutic relationship in cognitive therapy. It emphasizes the importance of the therapist and patient working together as a team to investigate the patient's thoughts and beliefs. The therapist does not act as an authority figure who dictates truth, but rather as a collaborator who guides the patient through a process of exploration and discovery. The term empiricism highlights the focus on gathering evidence and testing hypotheses. The therapist and patient work together to design experiments, collect data, and evaluate the results. This collaborative approach ensures that the patient feels heard, understood, and actively involved in their treatment. It also promotes a sense of ownership over the therapeutic process, which can enhance motivation and adherence. These techniques, initially developed to address depression, have proven remarkably adaptable and continue to serve as the bedrock of modern cognitive therapy. Their application extends far beyond the therapist's office. The principles of cognitive therapy have increasingly been integrated into online therapy platforms and self-help resources, making these techniques more accessible to a wider audience. Online programs often incorporate elements of thought records, behavioral experiments, and Socratic questioning, providing individuals with tools to manage their symptoms and improve their well-being independently. Furthermore, ongoing research has led to refinements and adaptations of these techniques. Mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, for example, integrates mindfulness practices with traditional cognitive therapy techniques. This approach helps patients to become more aware of their thoughts and emotions without judgment, allowing them to respond to negative thoughts in a more skillful and adaptive way. Acceptance and commitment therapy, while distinct, shares common ground with cognitive therapy in its emphasis on identifying and modifying maladaptive thought patterns. The enduring relevance of these techniques speaks to the power of Beck's cognitive model and its impact on the field of mental health. By providing individuals with practical tools for identifying and modifying their negative thoughts, cognitive therapy empowers them to take control of their mental well-being and live more fulfilling lives. The core principles remain, even as new approaches build upon and enhance the original framework. Cognitive therapy, initially developed to address depression, demonstrated a versatility that propelled its application to a broader spectrum of psychological conditions. This expansion saw cognitive therapy effectively adapted for the treatment of anxiety disorders and personality disorders, conditions previously considered less amenable to structured therapeutic interventions. The cognitive model, with its emphasis on the role of thoughts in shaping emotions and behaviors, provided a framework for understanding the unique challenges presented by anxiety disorders. Conditions such as panic disorder, social anxiety disorder, and generalized anxiety disorder each exhibit distinct cognitive patterns that contribute to the maintenance of anxiety symptoms. In panic disorder, for example, individuals often experience catastrophic misinterpretations of bodily sensations. A racing heart might be interpreted as evidence of an impending heart attack, or dizziness as a sign of imminent fainting. These interpretations trigger intense anxiety and fear, leading to a full-blown panic attack. Cognitive therapy for panic disorder focuses on identifying and challenging these catastrophic thoughts, helping individuals to develop more realistic and balanced appraisals of their bodily sensations. Techniques such as interruptive exposure, which involves deliberately inducing feared bodily sensations in a safe and controlled environment, are used to help patients learn that these sensations are harmless and do not necessarily lead to catastrophic outcomes. Social anxiety disorder, also known as social phobia, is characterized by an intense fear of social situations in which the individual may be scrutinized by others. This fear often stems from negative beliefs about oneself, such as the belief that one is incompetent, unattractive, or boring. Individuals with social anxiety disorder may also hold unrealistic expectations about social performance, believing that they must always say the right thing or avoid making any mistakes. Cognitive therapy for social anxiety disorder involves identifying and challenging these negative beliefs and unrealistic expectations. Techniques such as cognitive restructuring, which involves examining the evidence for and against these beliefs, are used to help patients develop more balanced and realistic self-perceptions. Behavioral experiments, in which patients deliberately expose themselves to feared social situations, are used to test the validity of their negative beliefs and to learn that they can cope with social situations more effectively than they anticipated. Generalized anxiety disorder is characterized by excessive worry about a variety of everyday events and activities. Individuals with generalized anxiety disorder often have difficulty controlling their worry and may experience physical symptoms such as muscle tension, fatigue, and difficulty sleeping. Cognitive therapy for generalized anxiety disorder focuses on identifying and challenging the negative thoughts and beliefs that underlie the worry. Patients are taught to identify their worry triggers, to distinguish between realistic and unrealistic worries, and to develop more adaptive coping strategies. Techniques such as worry exposure, which involves deliberately focusing on feared outcomes, are used to help patients habituate to their worries and to learn that they can tolerate uncertainty. The application of cognitive therapy to personality disorders represented a significant advancement in the treatment of these complex and often chronic conditions. Personality disorders are characterized by inflexible and maladaptive patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving that cause significant distress or impairment in functioning. These patterns are often deeply ingrained and resistant to change, making personality disorders particularly challenging to treat. Beck's cognitive model provided a valuable framework for understanding the cognitive underpinnings of personality disorders. He proposed that individuals with personality disorders hold core beliefs or schemas about themselves, others, and the world that are rigid, pervasive, and often inaccurate. These schemas shape their interpretation of experiences and influence their behavior in ways that perpetuate their difficulties. For example, individuals with borderline personality disorder often hold schemas related to abandonment, believing that they are inherently unworthy of love and that others will inevitably leave them. This belief can lead to intense fear of abandonment, which in turn can manifest in a variety of self-destructive behaviors, such as frantic efforts to avoid real or imagined abandonment, impulsive spending, substance abuse, or self-harm. Cognitive therapy for borderline personality disorder focuses on identifying and modifying these maladaptive schemas. Techniques such as schema therapy, which combines cognitive and behavioral techniques with elements of experiential therapy, are used to help patients explore the origins of their schemas, to understand how these schemas affect their current functioning, and to develop more adaptive ways of relating to themselves and others. Individuals with narcissistic personality disorder often hold schemas related to entitlement and grandiosity, believing that they are superior to others and deserving of special treatment. This belief can lead to a lack of empathy, a tendency to exploit others, and a need for constant admiration. Cognitive therapy for narcissistic personality disorder focuses on challenging these unrealistic beliefs and helping patients to develop a more realistic and balanced sense of self. Techniques such as cognitive restructuring and behavioral experiments are used to help patients examine the evidence for and against their grandiose beliefs and to learn that they can have meaningful relationships with others without being superior or entitled. Individuals with avoidant personality disorder often hold schemas related to inadequacy and social rejection, believing that they are inherently flawed and that others will inevitably reject them. This belief can lead to extreme shyness, social isolation, and a reluctance to take risks or try new things. Cognitive therapy for avoidant personality disorder focuses on challenging these negative beliefs and helping patients to develop a more positive and realistic self-image. Techniques such as cognitive restructuring and exposure therapy are used to help patients examine the evidence for and against their beliefs about themselves and others, and to gradually expose themselves to feared social situations in order to learn that they can cope with social interactions more effectively than they anticipated. The application of cognitive therapy to anxiety and personality disorders required adaptations to the standard cognitive therapy techniques. Due to the more chronic and complex nature of these conditions, therapy often needed to be longer term and more intensive. Therapists also needed to be more flexible and creative in their approach, tailoring the techniques to the specific needs of each individual patient. For example, exposure therapy, a common technique used to treat anxiety disorders, was modified to address the unique challenges presented by social anxiety disorder. In traditional exposure therapy, patients are gradually exposed to feared situations in order to reduce their anxiety. However, individuals with social anxiety disorder often experience intense cognitive distortions during social situations, such as the belief that they are being judged harshly by others. To address these cognitive distortions, exposure therapy for social anxiety disorder often includes cognitive restructuring. Patients are taught to identify and challenge their negative thoughts during social situations and to replace them with more realistic and balanced thoughts. Consider an individual with social anxiety disorder who avoids public speaking due to the belief that they will humiliate themselves. A modified exposure therapy approach might involve the following steps. First, the therapist would work with the patient to identify and challenge their negative thoughts about public speaking, such as "I will forget what to say" or "everyone will think I am stupid." The therapist would then help the patient to develop more realistic and balanced thoughts, such as "I have prepared thoroughly, so I am likely to remember most of what I want to say, or even if I make a mistake, most people will be understanding." Next, the patient would gradually expose themselves to increasingly challenging public speaking situations, starting with practicing in front of a mirror, then speaking to a small group of friends, and finally presenting to a larger audience. During each exposure, the patient would use cognitive restructuring techniques to challenge their negative thoughts and to focus on their more realistic and balanced thoughts. Over time, the patient would learn that they can cope with public speaking situations more effectively than they anticipated, and their anxiety would gradually decrease. The expansion of cognitive therapy beyond depression to encompass anxiety and personality disorders underscored the versatility and adaptability of the cognitive model. By tailoring the techniques to the specific cognitive and behavioral patterns associated with each disorder, cognitive therapy offered individuals effective tools for managing their symptoms and improving their overall quality of life. Aaron Beck's legacy resides significantly in the widespread adoption inception and enduring influence of cognitive therapy. His meticulously developed methods have reshaped the landscape of psychotherapy, offering a practical and demonstrably effective alternative to prevailing psychodynamic approaches. Cognitive therapy's core principles, emphasizing the role of thoughts in shaping emotions and behaviors, resonated deeply within the field, leading to its integration into numerous therapeutic models. One of the most notable outcomes of Beck's work is its pivotal role in the development of cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. CBT represents a synthesis of cognitive therapy's focus on thought patterns with behavioral therapy's emphasis on modifying actions through techniques like exposure and skills training. This integrative approach has become a dominant force in contemporary mental health care, providing therapists with a versatile framework for addressing a broad array of psychological challenges. The synergy between identifying and altering maladaptive thoughts alongside implementing behavioral strategies to promote adaptive responses has proven remarkably successful in treating conditions such as anxiety disorders, depression, obsessive-compulsive disorder, and post-traumatic stress disorder. The effectiveness of cognitive therapy and CBT is supported by a substantial body of empirical evidence. Numerous randomized controlled trials have demonstrated the efficacy of these approaches in reducing symptoms and improving functioning across diverse populations and diagnostic categories. Meta-analyses, which synthesize the findings of multiple studies, consistently confirm the benefits of cognitive therapy and CBT compared to other forms of treatment or control conditions. These robust findings have solidified the position of cognitive therapy and CBT as evidence-based practices, informing clinical guidelines and treatment recommendations worldwide. For example, studies have shown that CBT is highly effective in treating social anxiety disorder, with many patients experiencing significant reductions in their fear of social situations and improvements in their social skills. Similarly, CBT has been found to be effective in treating panic disorder, helping patients to manage their panic attacks and reduce their avoidance behaviors. In the treatment of depression, cognitive therapy has demonstrated comparable efficacy to antidepressant medication, with some studies suggesting that it may offer long-lasting benefits. Beyond its impact on professional practice, cognitive therapy has also had a considerable cultural influence. The principles of cognitive restructuring and challenging negative thoughts have permeated popular self-help resources, empowering individuals to take a more active role in managing their emotional well-being. Books, websites, and workshops based on cognitive therapy principles provide accessible tools for identifying and modifying unhelpful thought patterns, promoting greater self-awareness and emotional resilience. This democratization of cognitive therapy techniques has contributed to a broader public understanding of the connection between thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, fostering a more proactive approach to mental health. The accessibility of these resources allows individuals to implement strategies for improving their mental well-being, fostering a sense of personal agency and empowerment. Despite its widespread acceptance and demonstrated effectiveness, cognitive therapy is not without its criticisms. Some critics argue that its focus on individual cognition may neglect the influence of social and environmental factors on mental health. They contend that cognitive therapy may inadvertently place undue emphasis on individual responsibility for psychological problems, overlooking the role of systemic inequalities, cultural norms, and interpersonal relationships in shaping emotional experiences. These concerns highlight the importance of adopting a broader perspective that considers the interplay between individual cognition and the wider social context. Understanding the influence of social determinants of health, such as poverty, discrimination, and lack of access to resources, is crucial for providing comprehensive and culturally sensitive mental health care. Furthermore, some have suggested that cognitive therapy's structured and directive approach may not be suitable for all individuals or cultural groups. The emphasis on identifying and challenging specific thoughts may feel overly confrontational or invalidating for some clients, particularly those who come from cultural backgrounds that value indirect communication or emotional restraint. Therapists must be mindful of these potential cultural differences and adapt their approach to ensure that it is respectful and responsive to the client's individual needs and preferences. Flexibility and cultural sensitivity are essential for effective application of cognitive therapy across diverse populations. In conclusion, Aaron Beck's enduring legacy rests on his transformative impact on the treatment of mental disorders. His development of cognitive therapy marked a paradigm shift in psychotherapy, moving away from the exploration of unconscious processes towards a focus on conscious, accessible thoughts and behaviors. This shift led to the development of more effective and empirically supported interventions, particularly within the framework of cognitive behavioral therapy. While cognitive therapy has faced criticisms regarding its potential neglect of social and environmental factors, its widespread adoption and demonstrated efficacy have solidified its position as a cornerstone of contemporary mental health care. Beck's work fundamentally altered the way therapists understand and treat mental disorders, empowering individuals to take control of their thoughts and behaviors, ultimately leading to improved emotional well-being and a greater understanding of the human mind. The emphasis on empirical validation and the development of structured techniques has paved the way for continuous refinement and expansion of cognitive therapy, ensuring its continued relevance in the ever-evolving field of mental health. Cognitive therapy's influence extends beyond the clinical setting, shaping public understanding of mental health and promoting a more proactive approach to emotional well-being, solidifying Aaron Beck's place as a pivotal figure in the history of psychology.
We really appreciate you tuning in to this AI-powered presentation. Our goal is to push the boundaries of AI in content creation, and your input is invaluable. If there's a particular subject you'd like to see us tackle next, or if you have suggestions on how we could fine-tune our AI's creative prompts, please don't hesitate to leave your ideas in the comments section. We're excited to bring you more unique content very soon.